It is quite remarkable that the prophet Zechariah should have those words from God, that vision of rebuilding of a new Jerusalem, of old older people being able to sit peaceably and safely in streets, and boys and girls playing alongside them, and how resonant that might feel for us on this day, where we would just long to be able to do all of those things in such sense of security. So we enter this VE Day celebration with perhaps with some mixture of feelings. We can truly rejoice that we have for so many years lived in a land free from war and conflict, or free from conflict that has most powerfully impacted upon people's lives. We can look back and rejoice. We can look back too with perhaps questioning eyes and a sense of sadness too. I wonder if any of you were old enough to have been present at the first VE Day celebration. I wonder what that was like. I know my parents certainly can recall some of those events. My mom has died recently, and therefore I can only talk from her own memories. My dad can still articulate some of his experiences, and indeed has printed some of those into a published book. I wonder, what are your memories? How do you look back? What do you want to gain from this moment? I wish to share with you some of my own family memories. And I'm going to start actually with my great grandfather, who lived to the age of 103, having served through the First World War, largely on the Western Front and through the Somme as well. He refused always to talk about those experiences, but I have just one thing of his, which is this old pocket watch. It doesn't work, and a lot of fingers have dropped from it. And within it, there's a small inscription. It is actually his guardsman's watch. He was born in Devon and travelled up along the Great Western Railway to the growing sidings at Bescot in Walsall, and from there he worked for the rest of his life, apart from his time serving in the war. Uh, I kind of hold this watch, longing that I could just make it work. I don't know that it journeyed with him to France or the Somme. Maybe it's not battered enough to declare that, but it's something of holding back, something that was held so clearly and used through someone's life as they journeyed through not just one world war, but two. I turn then perhaps to his son, my grandfather, who was called to serve in the Worcestershire Regiment, and was commissioned to journey to India to fight at the Battle of Kohima and then into Burma. He spoke greatly about his times there. He laughed and joked about campfires and food that he ate, and made sure as best as he could he attended the annual reunion of the Worcestershire Regiment right up until he was probably 90, and then actually there were fewer people to attend, and he became physically unable as well. He kept his war medals in a box in the sideboard in the front room. They only ever came out on Remembrance Sunday, and he would sit and polish them, um, always dressed exceptionally smartly, and journey to stand amongst the crowds at the memorial service in the centre of Warsaw, very proudly, even in moments when really he perhaps physically should have stayed at home. One thing he would always say is that the only medal that was of any value was this one for him, and that is his Burma star. For all of his laughing and joking, he rarely really got into any great detail. It was only, I feel, in his last hours of his life, as I sat by his side in the in the home that he'd lived in for over 70 years with my nan, as he started to sort of ask if it was okay to have killed people, to have been in armed conflict. And it was very clear that through his mind was that sense of the real challenge of serving through conflict, and memories that had perhaps been kept deeply inside his mind, and which were now he was finally ready to share. Um, my grandfather left service and continued his profession as painter and decorator, always following someone else's instruction. My mum was born just before the Second World War, and I am truly blessed to have a letter which she wrote to my grandfather whilst he was in India. It's very, very, very fragile, and it's in a very simple sort of language. My mom is writing to my grandfather, uh, asking that maybe she would receive a doll for her birthday, and certainly one that does not cry. As she reflects on a family wedding that where she was bridesmaid, she's waiting still to see the photographs, and she hopes that she might be able to send one of them to her dad um, out in India. There is then, I assume, a postcard, telegram, service card that my grandfather sends back. It just simply says, um, "Many happy returns of the day to Margaret from your loving daddy, the 27th of May, 1942, on active service." And the simple message at the back says, "All well. Please don't worry. Please don't worry." For my father, it was a slightly different story. He was born and lived in a hamlet known as Upper Landywood, just in the Cannock area. Um, his childhood was there, very much a rural, sort of idyllic sort of um, existence, with his parents being able to keep a small amount of livestock, which was all very carefully regulated and produced, handed over to the government at regular intervals. My grandfather there was sent to work in the coal mines and emerged from that period to then enter into the heavy industry in the Black Country as we as a nation started to rebuild after war. And their story seems to pause for a while. A nation trying to re-establish itself. My grandfather had served in Burma and India, was always slightly cautious about people coming from overseas. It took a long while for him even to accept that there might be a Chinese takeaway at the end of their street, and I'm fairly certain that he never tried a meal from there. However, over those years, there was that growing acceptance of a diversity of nationhood, of people coming together, of forming what was initially a fragile peace into a growing peace, and a sense of new community, of all being one with our vastly shared histories and experiences. For me, I've always attended Remembrance Sunday as a good Boy Scout and Cub. That was the fashion. It was one of the rare times I used to go to church throughout a year. In my early banking career was spent very much in the heart of Birmingham, where I worked alongside people who were present when the two bombs were exploded by the IRA in the pubs there, and our working pattern of life was regularly disturbed by bomb scares and evacuations. For a period, I helped make sure that there was a flow of oil and trade through banking and finance during Gulf War, and indeed I was recipient of the messages from the banking system in Yugoslavia as that country went through a great period of change. And so there's much to reflect upon. We still live very much in a world of fragile peace, but also a great sense of hope and unity. I do truly hope that, as we have found in this day, that perhaps our freedom is somewhat restrained and constrained. We can start to give thanks for the freedom that we now for a period miss, but so powerfully appreciate. Zechariah's vision of the new kingdom of heaven is one which Jesus truly preaches. He asks us to remember, do this in remembrance of me, to bring to mind our memories, to recall them, to hold them, to value them, and in that remembering, live afresh and anew, immersed in our personal histories, in our community histories, and from that history, learn, grow, and develop. I do hope that as we share our faith together, as we continue in this pilgrimage of faith, as we continue to experience that deep peace which Christ brings, we truly can give thanks for those that serve, for those who gave so much for our peace and who then worked hard to restore nations across the world. As much as we might currently be fearful of the daily announcements of death in this land and across the world, and know truly how much that impacts upon individuals' of lives, we must also be mindful on this day that even the vast toll that we hear each day is still small compared even to the toll of those who found themselves in Auschwitz and gassed because they just happened to be of the wrong creed and faith. Peace is fragile. We are called to work at it. May we do that in confidence, in faith, in joy, in hope, and always seek to rejoice in the Christ who gave all that we might live, and those who followed in his wake and in his example, that we might enjoy peace in our hearts, in our minds, in our homes, in our lives and lands, and know too that in our remembering we meet again, as we truly all will soon meet again, and meet again yet further in the kingdom that God has prepared through his righteousness, his justice, and his mercy. Amen.